Hello everybody, hope you're doing good. Welcome back to the channel. Glad you could join me for another episode of redesigning Ghostbusters villains. Last time we started a new one. We're working on this nasty fellow here known as the Boogeyman from the episode appropriately named The Boogeyman Cometh from season 1 of the Real Ghostbusters cartoon. We had a lot of fun in the last episode exploring some design ideas. We talked about the basic plot of that episode and looked at some of the images from the show. So if you want to sort of see where all this is coming from, then I would suggest you go back and check out the first video as part of this redesign. So our goal today is going to be, with this line art pretty much good to go, we're going to dive into some rendering. And I always like to start with some nice shadows, some good ambient shadows, get real sculptural with things, figure out all the forms, and then we'll go from there. Basically the same process we used for the last villain we redesigned, Gash. So yeah, I think that's probably all the exposition we're going to need on this one. So yeah, come along for the ride. I really appreciate your support. I've got a free drawing guide if you subscribe to the channel, so feel free to check that out if you're interested. And otherwise, let's jump into this here. Hey, Zane, how's it going, man? Let's turn this down. So we got our underdrawing still visible. We don't really need that anymore. And this final line layer can get colorized. I usually like to work on something that is on the warmer side. Go for like a orange tone. I don't know. Let's see. Is that? Yeah, that might be too hard to. I always take a moment here to just figure out exactly what I want to do with the line colors. So that's kind of nice. Let's try that, and then excuse me, we'll go for like a little bit of a lower opacity. The whole point of this is we want to be able to see the shadows really clearly that we're sculpting. It's, we're trying to see the form. We're also trying to sort of, calibrate our value range. And if the line art is too strong, it might be difficult for us to judge that correctly. And I suppose at this stage, it's also worth just doing any sort of little tweaks to our line art if we see anything we want to adjust. I haven't looked at this since we were last working on this on the stream. So now that I'm seeing it with fresh eyes, I'm seeing, just a couple little elements of symmetry that probably want to just get adjusted. I think that's pretty common thing is when I come back to a piece after a while, I always see a few things I want to adjust. But in particular, the face, right? Like, if there's any part we need to obsess about, it's definitely the facial area. Everybody's going to be looking there first, and if that's weird, then it's game over, right? GG. Oh, thanks, man. I appreciate that. Well, let's see how we can do with these shadows. Let's see what this next stage is going to look like here. Yeah, okay, let's just get in here and have a no fear approach. We have the beautiful advantage of digital on our side to tweak and edit things that we don't care for. Now remember, the idea with this guy's eyes is that they're missing. So these are going to be like open sockets, which we'll have to kind of determine how like sort of fleshy and what the specific treatment is of that, but that's the overall idea. I'm kind of excited to see how that manifests. I get Get these folds going on in his face. He's got such a crazy, exaggerated face, and I've got a little picture over here, by the way, of from the cartoon, so you guys can kind of see. I remember last time you guys were wanting to kind of see what the source was of this idea. So we got that little guy off to the side there. Let's see. I kind of did a little extra. I guess I was a little non-committal about that shape there in the drawing, so we'll just kind of resolve that in this pass. And that's the one advantage of this particular variant of the process, where you do your shadows before you do your flats, is that you can change the design. You can change things from the line pass before you lock in. So if you're doing something and you're like, I don't know if I'm totally feeling the line art, maybe I want to tweak the design a little bit after I see it with tone. Some people really have trouble analyzing a design in just line form, and I totally get that. Then this process here, this variant, might be better suited for that. But I definitely like knowing that the process is a little bit customizable. It's a little bit of a choose your own adventure. The thing you always want to be looking out for too is that you're not just outlining forms with the shadows. I mean, a lot of things will feel as though they should be outlined, but I'm constantly changing the size of my brush so that I adjust the amount of fall off to the shadows, because you might have really narrow shadows in some pockets. You might have very broad shadows. Like, for example, we need to think about how we can get his overall spherical dome here represented. And that probably constitutes a little bit of a larger brush, right? Hey, Dom, welcome in. Good to see you, Tom. And you can also just pop in a really aggressive dark shadow early just to help your eyes calibrate to a more complete value range. It's just like a visual touchstone to remind you, hey, you know what? This is what the full range looks like. That can be helpful too. Obviously, do it in a spot where you're feeling confident you know where that value belongs. Somewhere where many forms are meeting together. It's interesting how cold these shadows look when they're sitting on top of the warmer lines, right? Like we get that really interesting relative comparison there. It sort of makes me want to make my shadows a little bit warm out of the gate. Yeah, maybe we'll tint them a little bit warm. I feel like they're feeling so jarringly cold. So I'm going to still work with black, obviously, but we'll just use an adjustment layer to warm these up a little bit. So you can see here, if you want to get some subsurface scattering vibes going on, this is definitely a way to kind of nudge that in the right direction. We'll go a little bit warm with it. I don't want to go too crazy, but just keep them from feeling super cold. Feeling like they're hyper disconnected from our drawing. remember what was I looking at? I was looking at some kind of an ear. I think I don't have that picture around anymore. I was looking at an ear for ideas on how to do the some of these ear forms. I think I'll just wing it. We'll just have some fun with the anatomy there. The drawing is giving me enough of a clue as to where I'd like to go with it. I think we'll just cheese this and paint the edge all the way through and then erase for the earrings. I mean, these are creature ears, so we definitely have an opportunity to do something a little unexpected with them. So I'm going to try to take advantage of that if I can. At the same time, we don't want to lose that relatable component. I give this example to students sometimes about relatable design. You know, I'll say something like, you could make your spaceship look like a flying banana, which might be very original, but maybe not very successful as a spaceship, right? Because no one's going to realize that it's a spaceship. So, in fact, I'm being a little cavalier with that balanced light suggestion there. Sometimes I'll sneak that in. Um, you know, with concept art being original is not actually at the top of your list, which I think surprises a lot of students. So, yeah, he's got quite the schnozola here. If you're somebody who has trouble drawing noses, well, maybe try drawing some crazy goblin noses. That might just break you out of your rut. It's probably some cool, like, weird, fleshy weirdness inside the ear or the eye cavities that we can have a little fun with. Let's go ahead and flip this so we don't get too lost in this render. I'm trying to think about maybe this cheek contour being a little bit different. It's such an extreme expression that, you know, you really are kind of pushing the anatomy around. pull these lines a little bit lighter so I can see my shadows more clearly. It really is surprising how little you need to see of your line art to make use of it. It's like you're the person who drew it, so even the stuff that may be very hard to see, you're likely going to kind of remember what was going on there. So having just a hint of it is sometimes all you need. When I'm rendering forms, I'll ask myself, what is the visual goal I'm trying to hit? What am I trying to say with the value? And oftentimes that the answer is just what's the volume? What's the simpler volume, right? Um, there are some things that can supersede that, but that's always, it's commonly at the very top of the list. So with these teeth, I think there's a lot of cool subforms that can be happening in here with these molars and stuff, but I have to remind myself this is a box, and I need to make sure that my values are explaining this as a box before it explains anything else. So if you're feeling like you're sort of having trouble explaining more complex forms, just immediately ask yourself, do I have an obvious value difference between the major sides of whatever volume this likely lives inside of? If you're talking about a cube, it's like, just think about, okay, there's a distinct value for all the visible sides. Have you done that, right? That's the first thing to establish. If you haven't done that, then all this other whatever detail and gobbledygook on the top is really not going to help things. So it's easy to make a chiseled form smooth and rounded. It's much more difficult to make a rounded, doughy form chiseled and geometric. So it gives you kind of a hint as to where to start or how to prioritize your thinking. So, like here, this could be a rounded tooth, or if I were to go like this, now it's a faceted tooth, right? We're assigning a value to a side. That's a creative choice. It could work either way. I sort of like it rounded because it sort of feels different than the molars. So we get a sense of transition from one tooth type to another. And then, man, he's got some really, really messed up teeth down here, doesn't he? You can also emphasize the contrast at the transition of planes. So, there's a top plane here, like this tooth is sort of like an upturned candy corn, right? And the top face I'm wanting to get hit with the light, and then I need to get the transition clear. So I'm going to emphasize the darkness as it hits this edge, but then we can go lighter as it gets further away from this. And what that does is it allows for a more nuanced description of the form, as well as it simulates reflected light. So you get a little bit of a two-hit combo there. But that's like a little bit of an advanced way of thinking about it versus just like a flat value for each of the sides. Is you think about how can you leverage gradients on the sides. It's like stage 2. Do I hide the lines completely once the AO pass is done? It depends. I think sometimes I like the lines just as like a textural component. So if they add some like fun little, kind of grain or something to it, I might just leave them in there. We're of course talking about images where the goal is for it to look like painted and rendered versus like a graphical line art style. Obviously, in that case, you definitely leave your lines in, right? You'd emphasize them. But yeah, in a process like this where it's not really intended to look like a drawn thing, the lines will not always go away. Like sometimes I will leave them in if I think that they're just kind of a fun little textural component to it. And it's kind of dependent on how much I like the lines. You know, some drawings just look better than others. I'm just like more confident with some drawings than other ones. Sometimes I feel like the drawing wasn't great and I made a lot of good changes and corrections in the shadow pass, and therefore that big difference maybe makes it less likely that I would retain the lines. But you know, it's funny because even lines that are fairly different than the render can still just add some cool textural information. So I guess the takeaway there is it's not consistent. Like you can kind of just evaluate how it's looking and see if you like it or not. And there's certain styles of art that really are they rely on that inclusion of the lines to some extent to get the right look. For these here, we're really de-emphasizing the lines, but they can still be a subtle textural component. And you know, think about how forms interact. You know, like if we can show that there's like a fleshy tongue that's pushing against these molars, and the molars are depressing it, almost like a pillow you're sitting on or something, right? Or like you know, you get those famous Italian sculptors, and it's like the whatever god holding the goddess, and like her skin is pressing in from his fingers and stuff. Like, you know, that's all like those are pro tips, right? Those are pro tricks to make everything feel more real. Think about how you can kind of boost things up with a little bit of that subtle interaction, that interplay between surfaces. All right, basically this whole section needs to just be darker because it's all sort of underneath the tongue. But I was like sneaking up on that darkness as I tend to. And we'll just shadow this stuff here. So this lip here is an important element to this guy's vibes. I think last time maybe it was, I think it might have been you, Tom, that was saying he gives you kind of like Joker vibes. So I think some of these features are very important to capturing some of that quality. It still does a bit, not a bad thing. Yeah, I agree. I think that's a cool thing to kind of play off of. All right, let's get a little darker there. Let's get some rounding to this brow. Again, this is just ambient, so you know we're gonna bring in, like we did with Gash, we're gonna do a little bit of like a key light indication from above, kind of subtle, so it'll exaggerate some of the forms going on here. And then I guess that let's see, trying to see where I suggested that this mouth connects. I think that was probably the line that I guess the line was maybe I was just kind of, no, I guess that was the line right there. That was the line do I like that line? Actually, this might be, no, that's the line of the, see, this is where the line art's light, you may actually lose a sense of it. Maybe I didn't even put in the far edge of the mouth there, which is a mistake, obviously. I think we want, let's see, probably want to go put a molar right there. These are just kind of issues with the drawing, right? We just didn't put this in. So let's get that little corner of the mouth realized. So I'm kind of trying to think about like these two lines, right? Like if we were to have those two, I think I'm going to pull this one a little bit in more. Okay. This is kind of fun to render such an extreme face. I was talking to someone earlier today about how I like goblin faces because they're so extreme, and I don't really paint them a lot. But you know, this guy's got kind of a goblin face going on, and it's definitely fun. Okay, we got his third eye here, which is just one of the ways that he sees, one of the many non-traditional ways that he is seeing his victims, I suppose. There is this like there's a line here that I realize is probably more there from me just wanting to kind of see the symmetry, but I almost wonder if it's cool to have like a weird scar, you know, like some weird. That's kind of cool, right? All right, I think we're just gonna go with that. Like some really weird subtle details in here that this is another thing about translating line art is that there's sometimes these little calligraphic marks that are kind of cool. Like they're you don't want to lose all that stuff, so it's not always obvious how to translate that into tone. If you're going to leave the lines behind, how do you capture some of that? What do you leave behind? Definitely not obvious, but we'll see what we can do here. Then we got the hair, which the hair, as we know from last time, is going to be like a window into like his nightmare dimension or whatever. And so the question is, how much form do we render of the hair? And I think, you know, if we want to be safe about it, it's sort of like, well, if you just render it with some form, you can always get rid of the form later, right? Like if we like it's not bad if it's over defined because we can always kind of yeah, we can always go more graphic if we need to, but if we omit all rendering to this section, then we're sort of forced into a certain level of graphic read. And I don't know that I want to feel limited to that specific expression of it. So I'm going to bring in just a little bit of form to this hair piece here. And it could be that maybe as it connects to the head, it's a little more physical looking. Like that's a way for us to try and kind of sell the idea of this window. I can't necessarily see too well what I had in the drawing, but I know it was kind of doing like these sort of these big shapes. Let's turn this off, see if I can see what I had. Is it way out there? I guess let's just turn the lines up for the moment so I can see that shape better. Okay, so it came out here like this. It's kind of reminding me of when we did the squid body for Gash. We had those big tentacle-like things going on. We're going to have some tentacles in this one too, I guess, with these guys. But with the hair, it's not going to have that same sort of rounded quality. This is just more to give us some sense of the shape that's here to act as a container for that window into the other dimension. Okay, let's turn this back down. All right, we'll get some cast shadows in here later to help that separate more. But I was wanting to define this area here because we need to put in some shadow behind the ear for this hair piece. This is where like a flats layer would be nice, right? Because we'd have this edge defined, but we're going to just do our best. Okay, I got to get the top of the ear working. And definitely some shadow behind the head. It's kind of cool, we're getting a little better sense of how that giant hair shape is going to read. I guess we can put in a little shadow for this creepy eye design. The plus for the iris or pupil, I guess it's kind of an iris-less eye design. Has sort of like a holy cross sort of undertone to it, which is like, I guess with these sort of like creatures, it's this like sort of blasphemous quality, and I think it's some weird undertones to that work for me pretty well. Not every member of the audience is going to clue into that, maybe, but if it even works for one person, that's probably still worth it. want to do some weirder. I wonder if I should have looked at some bat ears for the details in here. Right, they got some crazy stuff going on. I think I can kind of recall vaguely what they got going on. Get a lot of fun wrinkles in here. Just make sure we're considering the bigger shapes here. Kind of didn't capture this brow very well. There we go. That's still better. And then this transition here. Your one way to think about these passes is, if you can get it to read with just the shadows, then everything else later is just gonna help more. Like if it works like this, then you're in a good spot, right? If you guys see, there's an artist named Christoph Young. He has an awesome YouTube channel. Go check out his stuff. He's amazing, and he kind of does a little bit of this too, where he's very shadow focused initially. Um, his work looks amazing with just the shadow pass alone, and then everything else is just like dialing it in further, and that's kind of like the way I like to think about it too. I sort of feel like a machine when I'm doing this focused rendering stuff. Like I'm just sort of like analyzing the geometry in my head. I'm like ray tracing with my brain, right? Give a couple little extra hits of value here and there for some extra dimensionality. Uh, this whole idea of like these almost like dimples, these shadow dimples. If you want to see somebody who's like an expert at shadow dimples, take a look at H.R. Giger's work. He's like a master of the shadow dimples. Okay, so now let's get into some of this body clothing stuff. We're going to have a significant amount of shadowing underneath the head, obviously, because this guy's got a big old noggin and a giant jaw. Well, it's a slender jaw, but it's long. And so if there was any place we were going to get some extreme dark, certainly that little pit right there is going to be a top contender. And with a lot of this stuff, I don't really even know clearly like what the best place is to start. I just pick the thing that's most obvious and I just start there. And then when you lay down those marks, it can sometimes reveal or give you confidence to put down the next ones, right? And so you sort of you like surround the mysteries with known things so you can approach them easier. A little flipperoo here. Check ourselves. You could benefit from using smoothing on some of these marks, but I'm stubborn. I like to challenge myself to get the mark freehand if I can. There's got to be some value in that, right? Okay. You know, shapes like this, they're sort of complex, right? It's not as simple as a thing that can be reduced to a cube. So it's like, yeah, what are we saying there? What's the shape supposed to be there? And it's not always immediately obvious. But I sort of think about it like we've got this shape and then we've got this shape. And so, this one's sort of like less lit compared to the one that's facing up because we're going to have kind of lighting generally from above. And if you're not sure about the lighting when you're doing this, it's good to just default to thinking about lighting from sort of like the upper hemisphere of the image. Yeah, it's going to be the case in just a huge range of images and lighting situations. So like it's very unusual that ambient light would be coming from like underneath the character. Um, you can bounce light, right? But like the primary ambient lighting is coming from typically above. I'm gonna create a little more gradual transition for that edge there. We don't want to halo that too much because it's sort of pointing up out to the sky. It's not really adjacent to anything. Do I want to facet that tooth? No, I like it rounded. One thing I try to be mindful of with this approach, because we're sort of extending shadows from the recesses. That's kind of how we're working here. And there can be a tendency to end the shadows too soon. Like you don't get enough roll off. And then what happens is you sort of lose definition in the midtones. And there's a lot of important shape information that happens in that area. So the key way to try and address that is just make sure that you're thinking about making your brush big and creating some of those bigger fall offs, because we don't want to have to rely entirely on our diffuse reflections to describe all the midtones. We want the upper range of our ambient shadows to be filling in some of that range. Again, we're always thinking about what are these ranges of the sphere that we're trying to define, right? All these different regions, all the halftones, the highlights, the specular reflections, diffuse reflections, the coarse shadows, the bounce lights. Like we're it's like a puzzle, right? Each of those sections of the sphere needs to get filled in, and each of these layers we're trying to think about what part of the sphere is that describing. And we don't want to repeat ourselves because that's a waste of time. We don't want to miss something on the sphere because then that's a sphere that is not properly defined, or it won't feel as volumetric. Some shadows are very satisfying to put in place. Like that shadow from the sleeve there. It's just like, oh, it's like it was calling out to me to put it in place since I drew it. When it comes to defining folds and wrinkles, I generally sort of allow myself a lot of freedom to experiment with them because yeah, it's not it's not like we have a specific reference we're using, right? We're sort of thinking about tension points and the thickness of cloth and stuff like that, and I like to have a little bit of freedom to sort of play around with how stuff feels. So this is an area where the line art and the shadow stuff might deviate more dramatically, where how I just get in here and I kind of just push and pull some of these things around until I like how it feels. So that's, I guess, another advantage to doing this before the flats are defined is a lot of freedom to get experimental with the seemingly random folds. Again, there are some important bits of logic applied, but again, we don't have a specific reference for how that might look exactly. It's also important to think about how something is tailored. Like, where are these seams? Like I know that, on a jacket like this, we're going to have a seam where the arm connects. So you're going to have some stiffness in that area, right? Those sorts of subtleties can really bring some realism to your design. And we could even, erase a little bit of a lip here as that connects. So now we have an even more obvious sort of feeling to that connection. Again, the armpit, this is like an area where we're just going to get like a pretty broad sort of ambient shadow spilling out. So make sure you can get that brush big enough to express that. Is very like airbrushy, this pass, because since we're dealing with ambient shadows and ambient shadows are soft shadows, they're only hard edged when we're dealing with a form that has a hard edge on it. It just tends to feel very airbrushy to do this pass. And then when you get into expressing other types of lighting, then you might not have that softness, right? The other thing is, the shadow that is along the edge of the body here from this coat. So you can kind of think about how when it's up here on top of his body, it's resting on him, right? Gravity is pushing this down onto him. And so the space between him and this is probably a little bit tighter here. And then and as a result darker but thinner. And then as it gets down here, it's kind of blowing away from his body. So we get a broader shadow, but it's also a weaker shadow. So getting that transition of shadow from like dark and tight to wide and loose, like that is another way to try and achieve realism in the shadows, that variation. And ambient occlusion and ambient shadows are all about proximity. You gotta sort of like obsess over that proximity component. Let's get into this hand and this arm here. This is going to be a fun one. I want to try to get some good like veininess in this arm. The other thing as well is if you're trying to do this sort of tonal pass and you're struggling to define things, or you're not confident with the drawing underneath, something feels wrong, you can always just draw with shadows. Like you can just make your shadow brush smaller and just think about it like you're drawing lines again. I do that all the time if I'm searching. I mean, we're in these areas where everything's sort of very well, hands can be very sort of mechanical, right? Like they're functionally very complex. There's a lot of detail in a very sort of compact area. And so there's a sort of a mechanical aspect to that, right? And mechanical things tend to require a little more of that precision and mapping out. So this is an area where I might resort to some more almost drawing like shadow, or approaching shadow more like drawing for a bit. And then I can go back to a tonal approach. I can sort of soften some of the expression of these shapes if I don't like them. Yeah, think about like, where that knuckle is. I tend to like put in little sort of like diamond shapes for that. And then think about like the hand bones coming up off that. Remember that they all kind of come to a point here more toward the middle. There's like a fan that they form. And if you're going to do, especially like a hand where it's going to feel more bony, and you want to get some veins and some fleshy bits feeling convincing, then you definitely want to think about what the skeleton is doing. I guess that's at an angle where I guess we won't really see that indent too much, but the hands of a character are the second most expressive part next to the face, right? So if you're feeling like you're spending a long time on the hands, that's good. You probably should. They deserve that attention. Like you can sort of glean a lot from a person by just looking at their hands, right? Like it's just, yeah, they're just insane. They're a lot of fun to work on and capture some of the gestural nuance. You might be doing an image that is not an entire body. Might be a portrait or just an upper body shot. And then you might spend a little more time on the hands. So let's say that they were doing something where they were like punching towards the camera or raising their hands up holding something important. I mean, those are all situations where the hands require insane amounts of attention, right? So you can see even with a full body design like this, we're still trying to be really descriptive with what these hands are doing. I I worked on a piece for Blizzard years ago, and I had Luke Mancini was the art director for that project, and or he was serving as feedback for that particular piece, and I had some reasonable hand drawings in there. I did a bunch of sketches for him and stuff, and I got feedback and some doodle overs, right? And I was looking at it, and I was like, yeah, his hands are just way more expressive. Like I was playing it way too safe with those hands, so I definitely appreciated that feedback. I was thinking, yeah, that's definitely way better. So you kind of like experience these things, and it you take it with you, right? You're like, yeah, I should make sure I do that next time, and then that kind of becomes part of your arsenal moving forward. I mean, that's what you should do, right? Like as you learn things and absorb new information, it shouldn't be something that you just do for that one image. It should be something you try to take with you into the future for your future works. So that way you're like a big Katamari Damacy ball, right? You're like just rolling around, just getting bigger and bigger in knowledge, and take notes. Take notes if you can't remember stuff you've done. Okay, let's see here. Get some of this, a little bit of this gnarly detail in. Now I want to think about some of that vein stuff that I want to do, and if I want to do it here, if I want to wait to do it later, we can do it now. Did I ever work with Trent? No, I didn't get a chance to work with Trent. I have friends who've worked with him, but no, not directly. I think he's got. I think he has his own game now, doesn't he? I think he put out his own game title. I hope that's going well. I forget the name of it. Shoot, my friends would definitely remember the name though. Twilight Monk. There we go. Yeah, I remember I saw that came out and it looked really cool. It's a huge deal to be able to put out your own title like that. I've never developed my own video game, but I have developed other things. Some things that cannot be spoken of at the moment, but yes, I have experience developing projects, and it's a lot of work. Okay, let's get that a little closer in there, and then I may even pull up a reference of a veiny forearm at some point, so we can kind of inform some of those choices. Yeah, it's a lot of work. I don't actually know when Trent was at Blizzard. I'm not sure like what his I know he was there for Diablo 3. Um but yeah, the exact timing and all that, I'm not actually sure. I think he's got a YouTube as well. You might even pop over there and shoot him a question on that, or you might even see it listed somewhere on his like LinkedIn or something, probably, right? Okay, let's see. So I gotta do his stomach. I'm not totally done with everything over here, but I'm feeling like I've got some good initial hits to that section. So I think we can keep moving here, get a nice good pass on everything. Yeah, project management. Yeah, time management and resource management, and there's just so many steps. And with a digital product like that, um, with a game, I guess specifically, right, you need to be dealing with engineering and all the headache of. That's why, like, I don't do at the moment. I don't do any game development, personal game development, because I don't want to deal with the engineering side of things. I'd much rather deal with physical products, even though that has its own set of challenges like printing and distribution and all that other crud. But it all feels a little bit more doable, just without needing to be like hiring very specialized people to help with it. I can kind of figure it out. Whoops, there we go. I think I might just lasso this little piece here. So I think we just want to go pretty dark with that anyway. So with the lasso, you just got to be careful you don't get some of these little like weird seams. I guess that's like a little button. Trying to remember what I was suggesting with that. I think that was supposed to be a button, and then there's like a trim piece here. Yeah, that works. I guess we'll have a fair amount of ambience underneath the stomach here as well. This is another little corner pocket we can lean into. Eyeball, corner pocket. like the idea that there's some like layers to this. You know, like our eyes are not, well, they're complicated, but like the lid and everything is, it's fairly simple. It doesn't have a lot of layering going on. And it's kind of fun if you do like a creature eye, right, or a monster eye like this. You can kind of amp up all those things a little bit. Here again, we've got that weird cross eye that I love so much. Get a nice spherical rendering on this guy. It's probably pretty dark right in that little pocket there. And then we'll get some shadow underneath. The question is always how far do you radiate the deformation? It'll give it a nice little protrusion there. Try and express a little more roundness to that. Sometimes it's good to just go too far and see, like establish what too far is, and then pull back from there. So otherwise you may never reach that point. Okay, and then I guess his pectoral muscle is like here somewhere. His tiny little goblin pecs. Some kind of rib cage sort of rippling going on there. Hey Patrick, how's it going? Got a little hit there and there. I guess we should flip it. We've been working in the other direction for a while, so let's flip it around. Nice. Oh, thanks, man. Thank you. Yeah, we're knee deep in the ray tracing over here. Kind of mirror that button over on this side. I think that'd actually be funny, like a T-shirt that says "Human Ray Tracer" on it. Basically, nobody would get it except for people in on the joke, but it'd still make me laugh. Go a little broader with that. Yeah. Get a little line for our trim so we know where that is. Get a little extra darkness on that button. Give it a little weight. Maybe a little ambience below. Oh, and I can see in the line art I actually suggested a little bit of like a counter ripple there, which I don't think I like that as much now that I'm doing the tone work, but it was a valiant effort. That's kind of interesting though, a little A little pinch there. Maybe that prompts some other exploration here. Yeah, yeah, okay, all right. Sometimes the past me is trying to help the future me, and the future me is not listening. All right, time to do a big tube. Tube for that leg. And that tail is definitely going to be a pain in the butt to get that flowing. That might require some brush smoothing. And then there's always the question of how planar do I want to make the knee, and I typically tend to go a little bit heavier with the plane change there. Oh boy, okay. Goat feet. Do I have a reference for? Not really. Do I trust myself? No, I don't. Do I? No, I trust myself. We're gonna try it. I was thinking about any looking at an image for pig feet. This is like, don't do what I say, not what I do moments where you probably should just look up reference for this, but it's a creature, so I'm feeling like a little bit overconfident in my ability to make like a weird creature foot. A funky cloven sort of situation, because I don't really feel like it needs to be exactly like a known animal foot. It just needs to be reminiscent of one. So that's what I'm going to tell myself. That's the justification. Nice. Yeah, I guess so. In some ways, maybe. Although that's not how it feels in my head anyway. All right, let's get a little more tubular with this shading. Make it totally tubular, dude. That's like specific to the lingo of the 90s and likely more specifically in the United States. But I don't know. Ninja Turtles was like a global phenomenon, so there's that, I guess. We probably want some little textural fur bits throughout here, so we'll sprinkle some in. Vary this edge. If this were more of a stylized thing and we had like big old clumps of fur, we'd be here for a little while longer, carefully defining. This would be like if we were doing like a riot splash art or something, we'd be like, crafting every strand with the perfect like contours and everything. I mean, they just get so wild with that stuff. definitely works for them. Everybody loves that stuff. I think it looks cool too. Just I I don't know that it'd be my favorite thing to obsess over individual hair strands quite that much, but I'm sure if I was paid enough money, I could be really excited to do that. It's like, here's a job where we're going to pay you $200,000 a year, but you have to just paint and draw frogs. And I'd be like, yeah, maybe that's fine. Maybe that's cool. I would gain a new interest in frogs, I guess. Okay, what am I trying to say with this? I guess we can sort of segment it a little bit like that. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, it is just a lot of work. Yeah, there's no. I mean, there's just certain like marketing images, splash arts that there's just no way around it. It's just an immense amount of just super crazy rendering and compositional experimentation and all that stuff. Yeah. I definitely agree. All right, if you're working on something, remember to save your work, everybody, because I don't trust none of that there auto save. All those young kids are using these days with the auto saves. You would enjoy working 2 months on some detail passes. Yeah, I can see that. I can see you doing that. You definitely seem like a very detail oriented artist, so that makes sense. All right, let's lean into the shadow here again so we can create that little value touchstone for ourselves. Keep ourselves properly calibrated. This guy's ready for a concert, he's ready to rock and roll and summon some eyeball friends at the same time. But, it's fine. At a metal concert, I don't know that anybody would notice. The eyeball guys would fit right into the crowd. Hmm. That's weird. My hard drive just disconnected without me disconnecting it. That's never a good sign. I'm going to pull up my ZXT. I'm going to pull up some of my system stats real quick just to see how our temps are looking. 35, 58. Yeah, everything's fine. I don't know why my hard drive just decided to like reconnect. You know, you get that pop-up that says, "Hey, buddy, your hard drive just connected. What do you want me to do with it?" It's like, dude, it was already connected. I don't want you to do anything with it. Now you got me all worried. My temps are fine. This is a new build, remember, guys. If you've been on the channel a while, you'll know that we're working with the new machine here that I built not too long ago, and so I'm always a little bit I'm a little extra paranoid about computer problems in the first couple months after a new build. Also, if you guys want to see another artist that's just like a killer shadow renderer, um, among the myriad you could find on ArtStation at any one moment, check out the work of Carlos Huante, a guy I've mentioned here on the channel before because he was an artist designing some of the creatures for this cartoon way back in the 80s, kind of earlier in his career, right? Then he went on to do, you know, bigger film work and stuff, but he is a monster at rendering forms, organic forms. It's just like so cool, so inspiring. Turning your favorite game characters into a rock metal band, like how they did it in World of Warcraft with the Elite Tauren Chieftains. Yeah. ETC, man, classic. I still have my T-shirt from the very first BlizzCon ever. It's it's a little faded looking, but it's hanging in there. Yeah, a relic in time. I remember they were demoing StarCraft Ghost there, which is being developed by or co-developed by oh gosh, what was the name of that studio that worked on it? Was it like something Monkey Productions or gosh, why am I forgetting right now? Man, that's terrible. Um, what the heck? Wow, like I don't know why I'm having so much trouble remembering that right now. Anyway, yeah, it was like the only time I think that it was ever publicly shown. Yeah, we're getting a little juicier with our midtones on this guy than we did on Gash. I'm taking a little bit more time with the shadow pass on this one. Again, you know, it's like great to be doing the content on the channel and everything, but I also want to be pushing myself. So, you know, you guys will have to bear with me as I like sometimes obsess over weird things because I have some goals also I'm trying to hit with these. And the idea would be that if we can, you know, practice these things, then we'll just get faster at them, right? And then they won't take as long. Yeah, it's something where I was just noticing that. Yeah, I tend to lose some form description in the lower mid and the lower half tones. I fixed the issues with the upper half tones when I made the diffuse reflections their own dedicated pass. It's like, okay, good, we solved that, and now it's like, okay, we need to make sure that the shadows describe enough of the lower half tones. We don't want to like lose that. So trying to not neglect that. Okay, nope, don't like that little shadow. Let's kill that. Cool. He worked on the cartoon. Yeah, yeah. I know. I didn't. How did I learn that? I don't. Oh, well, actually, I genuinely don't remember how I discovered that. So, unfortunately, yeah, I can't. So, I can't relay the source on that, but definitely is true because you can go to his IMDb and look at it, but I know that that's for a fact not how I discovered that, so I can't remember at the moment. StarCraft Ghost could have been something cool. I agree. There was a lot of potential in that. I didn't think I'd be on stream live on YouTube painting crotch hair tonight, but here we are. As an artist, you got to be prepared to go places other people maybe don't go, I guess. That's why I have like some concern for students that are very averse to certain topics. Like they're like, I mean, I get there's like some sensitivity that's required, but it's like as an artist, you've got to like in the entertainment field. Like, I mean, it's definitely going to be a little tricky for you to always be in your perfect safe space in terms of content, especially if that safe space is very narrow, right? Like all I know is Pokemon. It's like, oh shit, you're in trouble. So I guess the point there is trying to broaden your horizons a little bit and immerse yourself in a multitude of things so that way you can tackle many different challenges. Let's flip this because I feel like I'm misnavigating this knee definition. Yep, I totally was. I knew that I was doing that. I could tell. There we go. Okay. I was like, I'm just losing sight of the perspective of that kneecap. That's what happens with tonal rendering sometimes. You just kind of like space out. Space out. Space Ghost. I like some of these weird like little fur patches that we got going on here though. I feel like that's working really well. I'm wandering a little here because I'm just kind of like checking things. an effort to try and get those lower half tones. I'm gonna creep in a little more than I would feel normally comfortable doing, but I think it's gonna help us later. All right, let's get this foot figured out. This is like I'm like almost done with this leg. It feels silly to like not just finish this part. It's so close to being done. See, Carlos Wante would be finding some brilliant way to like create forms within forms on this hoof that would look sweet. We're doing our best here. Let's just pull a little bit of the highlight in this area, and let's bring a little more shadow underneath this section. Yeah, we'll kind of go for a little bit bigger form description there. Maybe we just need to go a little heavier with that shadow on the knee. Get that transition feeling really solid. It's a total hack. We're totally doing it. The pocket has a little bit of like kind of tailored detail, and maybe I guess a little bit of shadow off that as well. Okay. Neat. I do really like these couple little folds right here. Let's push those a bit more. And I guess we want shadow right in this triangle, which, if you guys don't know, triangles are like the magic shape for good shadows. These super dark sections. Triangles are an awesome shape. Okay, let's push our values in a couple other spots here. Get a little darker. It looks so soft. I want to make sure that it doesn't look too well. We got work to go on this guy. I don't want to get too overly concerned. I think we can address some of this in the next stages. Let's go ahead and get on that other arm. Let's get that handled, because I feel like that's definitely going to be helpful to just kind of seeing the whole gesture of the character come into place. So sleeve is here. Actually, I'm going to do a quick water break here. In a random show and tell, I got these little stress balls, little jelly stress balls on Amazon. I don't particularly need stress balls to relieve stress, but I like squeezing these silly gel balls. They're fun. So yeah, they're kind of like, I guess, like the same purpose as like a fidget spinner, right? I sort of like having random things around my office here to fiddle with. For a small break, exactly. Yeah, it actually came with three of them. It came with a soft one, a medium one, and a hard one, so you can sort of give yourself different levels of challenge with your. It's like it's also supposed to be for grip strength. I mean, I don't really care about my grip strength, but I could see how it could be like used in a physical therapy kind of setting. There's probably some benefit to that just in terms of like artists using their hands a lot, right? Like just kind of, I don't know, making sure your hands are not getting all messed up. Ooh, solving your Rubik's cube, nice, dude. I never mastered doing that. Just looks like a bunch of colored squares that are not where they're supposed to be. Although I can juggle, so I don't know if you can juggle. Maybe I got that one over on you. All right, this is going to be one of those things where we're just going to have to block it in and then feel it out. At 1 point for me. Now, I'll be honest though, I max out at 3 balls. I never was able to get better than that. So I have some nice juggling balls though. I should get back to those. Are also like they're like right over there. Again, in my assortment of random office things that I go to for a break or whatever. But I should try to get the whole 4 or 5 ball juggling down one day. That'd be cool. Okay, second hand. Let's just span this section here like so. Here's our hand bone. In fact, it's going to be pretty soft. So you generally want to be leaning on shadows for the side with the overlap. It's like when you're drawing a face in 3/4. Like you don't draw this side of the nose, right? You draw this side of the nose. So when you're doing knuckles, like, it's 3/4 that way. So we're going to lean into shadows for this side of the hand bones. And we're going to go real subtle with this side. And it's the same philosophy with line weight, right? You're going to lean into the stuff that you need to for overlap, to show overlaps. There's so much about line art that bleeds into painting. Like there's so much overlap there. And there's a lot of it that's fairly obvious, but there's actually a handful that's not obvious, and that stuff is equally important. Just take a look and see how that's looking with the other hand there. Yeah, yeah, I think that'll work. I think our drawing was already at a pretty decent spot, so I'm not like super concerned. But yeah, it's always worth checking your work, looking at the two hands comparatively. Sounds like a super wicked finger. Maybe we should make it like even longer. Maybe it's like a super crazy long nail. Ugh, nice. And then, oh, I guess I kind of borked the that segment there. Whoopsies. There we go. I was thinking too much about the nail and I got lost. Okay, what was going on with this finger back here? We sort of like shortcutted it a little bit. No worries. We'll just draw it in this phase here. That's too big. Let's scale it. Oops. Okay, sure. Let's make it a little more profile. You know, nails are so helpful to explain the direction of a finger. Like, sometimes I notice artists get a little freaked out or they kind of omit the nails because they're like, oh, I don't know, it's like a detail, and I don't know, it just freaks them out. It's like the nails are actually going to help you. Definitely add those in. Don't omit that. It's like adding a bracelet on, right? It's like just another way to express the angle of the arm, which we didn't consider that with this guy. I don't think we need it on this guy, but yeah, could have been maybe interesting. Oh, actually, we want to go like that, and like that. Yeah, we might just we might add in those veins a little later, I think, as I can get a better sense of the how much the color information is going to help us establish those, or if we're going to use color to establish those. So kind of want to control the subtlety on that. Um, and then I guess we were saying that fourth finger is just hidden on both hands. Does that seem right? I guess this one would be sort of like curled in, or let's see. 3, 1, 2. I guess maybe we could show like a little bit right here. Yeah, I think I like a little bit of that showing. Maybe we'll just straighten this out a little bit. And then I'll just show a little hint of that finger back there. Yeah, okay, that's cool. I think that works. right, now let's get into some of the sleeve stuff here. If you want to see somebody who designs clothing folds really well, just look at JC Leyendecker. Man, that guy. Whew, every freaking wrinkle is like hyper crafted. Ultra optimized. Okay, lean into some of these little pinches a little more. And then we can go for the sleeve itself, which maybe we should do a little lasso guy on this. Okay. And I guess we do minus the nose. This is one of those selections that, again, it'd be nice if we just had one as another layer. I could fill this actually. Let's do a utility layer here. So now I can just click that whenever I need it. Yeah, let's do that. And now we can smoke in that big, juicy ambient shadow underneath that arm. Yeah. Create a little fold variation. Well, yeah, okay. That's starting to work for me. I guess this does want to be a little more shadow here. Okay, yep. Sort of like, it's like a little triangle there. Yeah, that's cool. Let's go with that. Do we like the, I think maybe we need a little more shadow underneath this eyeball. Probably get a little darker with this definition here. A little more in the corners. And then a little more underneath the chin. Sure, get that kind of separating off the body. Maybe a little bit more underneath the nose here. Don't like that separation there as much. Okay, yep. Get a little broader shadow. Again, that sort of lower halftone range. Okay. Okay, now we need to do this this coat here. So let's just lasso this out. I'll have to finesse that edge there. But yeah, let's just get this locked in. And now we can finesse that edge. Okay. The outer edge of this needs some shadow, certainly. I want to just soften the edge of this a little bit. And maybe it does get a little bit of shadow from the leg there. Yeah, I could just do a little bit just for overlap's sake and have a gradient of shadow from the end upward. Kind of help you feel that curvature. I think I want to just kind of more in shadow with this whole section here. Flip it around, still looking pretty decent. Flipped around, a couple areas of darkness we need to establish to keep your eye moving. We got his ear back here that we forgot about, so let's make sure we get that in. Oh, careful of that edge. And we did have a little bit of hair here too, didn't we? So let's make sure we get a few strands showing back there. Okay. Oh gosh, we're already hitting our time here for tonight, which I'm definitely happy with what we've been able to accomplish, even though maybe it felt a little bit slower. You know, like I think my aim is to try to get this shadow pass done in one session here, but we got pretty far. So you know, we've just got like the tail basically, and then his little eyeball minions to render. I think that's actually going to go fairly quickly. We'll need to continue to finesse some of the shadow work. You know, we haven't even sort of explored the what this looks like when we duplicate the shadows, right? To just quickly establish a little bit of a heavier pass. I don't always do this at 100% opacity, right? Like I'll just kind of boost it all up a little bit, and then I'll kind of selectively go in and lean into certain spots. But I think, you know, we're getting kind of a good preview of what's going to be happening there. Whenever we have a nice shadow pass like this, I'm always so anxious to stick the colors underneath this thing, right, and then start to add the lights on top. Like it's like, oh, it's just like dessert, right? Like you really want to just get to that part because it's going to be so fun to see those forms realized. You know, throw the rim light on there, like it starts to feel so 3D. But I think we're already getting a pretty good idea of where this is going. Yeah, it's been fun. I pretty much like every stage of the image. You know, like designing the image is cool. We get to concept all the crazy shapes and kind of explore how we want to deviate from the original. And there's a funness in the loose aspect of that stage. Then you know the line art is fun because we're really sort of you know finessing the shape language and the silhouette, and we're just sort of working on our you know, calligraphic markings. And then the shadow pass is fun because it's our first time really seeing things become three-dimensional, and it's a very sculptural pass, so that also makes that pass really fun. When we add the colors in, it's fun because we get to see the way that the character is going to sort of look broken up into those different sections. It's just there's something cool in each one of the phases, right? And I think that that's what we all want to try to work towards, is a process where we really enjoy all of the steps. Um, you know, funny enough, I almost think that maybe the line art is the final line art is maybe lower on the list of things that are fun for me, because sometimes that feels very sort of just mechanical. Even though we were sort of joking about this pass being like human ray trace mode, right? But there's something really satisfying about sculpting the forms and seeing them. Whereas the line art, I feel like, is in some ways it sort of is doubling down on things we've already said. So I think for me, there's a little bit of redundancy there, which is maybe why we're not doing a super clean line pass for these. I'm just sort of skipping that and we're just going right to the shadows. So yeah, it's interesting. It's stuff to think about, stuff for you guys to think about with your process, right? Like, where are you maybe being redundant? What parts do you love? What parts do you not like? And how can you maybe change that around, right? How can you adjust it so that way you are enjoying more of your process? So I think that's going to be it for tonight. So I think we got pretty far. I'm definitely excited about this one. Thank you guys for hanging out with me. I really appreciate it. Yeah, just keeps me going and keeps the channel going, and we'll see where this all goes, and see how many of these villains we're going to redesign. I don't really have any limit. Like, there's no pressure on me to do any particular thing with this channel. It's so new, right, that you know, we could do whatever the heck we want, darn it. And if we want to keep doing these Ghostbusters villains, then we'll just do that, right? If people are liking it. So yeah, I'm aboard for the ride, wherever we go with this thing. Let me see what we got. So Patrick, thanks for hanging out. Tom, Zane, Badass Chicken, thank you for joining me. Thank you. I really appreciate that. So yeah, come back next week, guys. Same time, same place, and we'll see where this goes next. All right. Take care, everybody. Good night.